The morning air above Archbridge Hill carried a silence that wasn't born from absence, but from restraint. Before the city stirred, before espresso machines hissed to life, and parking garages groaned, open the sun began its quiet ascent, brushing the sky in thin lines of silver and bone, and perched high above that sleeping sprawl stood the Archbridge Precision Arena, a cathedral of discipline, exclusivity, and carefully curated ambition. It wasn't designed to welcome. It was designed to intimidate. All steel bones and granite skin, its gleaming glass facade reflected more than just skyline. It mirrored the unspoken rules of who was allowed inside. Below it, rows of luxury vehicles dozed in their assigned spots like predatory animals at rest. Sleek, expensive, an unspoken competition of paint and plate. And then, like a scratch across polished marble, came the Corolla. Old dusty. The kind of car you park in shadows, not beside Bentleys. Its engine gave one last protest before cutting out, coughing a wheeze of heat into the morning stillness. From inside, the door creaked open not with ceremony but with reality. She stepped out. At first glance, she didn't look wrong, just misplaced, like someone who had walked into the wrong painting. She wore a denim jacket softened by too many winters, jeans frayed at the knees, boots scuffed into anonymity. But what drew the eye, what held it, was the rifle slung across her back. A Winchester M70 bolt action, wood-stocked chipped near the guard and held not with pride, but with history. She adjusted the strap gently and shut the car door behind her. The parking lot with all its polished glass and chrome curves seemed to recoil from her presence. And yet, she walked forward, straight-backed, silent, as though the air itself parted out of memory, not permission. No one asked her name. No one needed to. Not yet. The main entrance of Archbridge greeted its guests with a sensory ballet, the shimmer of recessed lighting, the soft brush of velvet ropes, the quiet inhale of climate control that smelled faintly of cedar metal polish and legacy. The VIP check-in desk sat just ahead, guarded by a man whose jawline had never known uncertainty. Grayson Doyle. His cufflinks were platinum, his hair obeyed the laws of wealth, and his eyes, when they lifted to meet hers, went sharp. The way people go, sharp before they say something cruel they've practiced in the mirror. She didn't flinch. She didn't announce herself either. Instead, she approached measured and quiet, a rifle ghosting her silhouette, and stopped exactly 3 feet from the carbon fiber desk. Grayson's expression was carved from marble. "I'm sorry, but community walk-ins are redirected through the East Wing," he said. "Without checking, this lane is reserved for members and their certified guests." She didn't respond with indignation. She didn't lower her gaze either. What she did was reach slowly into the interior of her jacket and withdraw a plastic card, scuffed bent barcode nearly faded, and handed it over. Grayson blinked. His hand accepted it reluctantly, a gesture not of trust, but of protocol. He waved it across the scanner with a smirk, already beginning its ascent across his mouth. Until beep, a glowing green checkmark lit up the console, confirmed guest ID Delaney Knox. The smirk died before it fully formed. She met his eyes again. This time her voice cut through the polished hush like a whisper of wind through a canyon. "I'm a guest." Grayson stepped aside, something bitter caught between his teeth. "Proceed," he muttered. But the silence said louder. "You weren't supposed to get this far." Inside the arena, the aesthetic shifted from cold welcome to clinical glory. Everything gleamed on purpose. The marble floors beneath her boots looked like poured obsidian. The rifles on the walls weren't tools. They were trophies frozen mid-pose behind crystal cases. Even the air had a weight to it, as if pressurized by reputation. Digital leaderboards flared to life along the corridors. Langston, Caro, Merritt. Names not just of shooters, but of dynasties. And then there was her, the girl no one knew. The girl with a rifle that looked like it belonged in a pawn shop, not in precision. Chambers calibrated by lasers and ego. Eyes followed her. They didn't hide it. In the VIP lounge, a teenager champagne wristwatch gleaming leaned into his friend She from the janitorial staff. A woman nearby, lips lacquered in regret, colored gloss, snorted behind her glass. "Maybe she's here to reclaim something," she said, voice laced with mock sympathy, like pride. The laughter rolled gently like fog off a shallow grave. Delaney kept walking. She stopped at lane 9, empty, untouched, likely left that way out of superstition or, worse, unspoken rule. The outlier lane, the one where you didn't want to be seen, unless you were trying to climb your way out of something. She set the case down. The latches snapped open soft and deliberate. Inside her rifle, old scarred, a ghost of wars that hadn't made it into textbooks. A memory wrapped in walnut and steel. She brushed a finger over the initials carved into the wood. HK, not hers. Before she could begin setup, a shadow fell across the lane. Liam Caro, tall, broad. Too composed to have ever known real consequence. His tactical vest fit like a designer blazer. His rifle mat, black etched with family crest, gleamed like a trophy. He didn't sneer. Not exactly. He did something more polished. He smiled. Cute relic, he said, nodding toward her. Winchester still fire, or just for the cosplay. Delaney didn't look at him. He stepped closer. Let's make it interesting. 1 round 10, shot score to score. She remained quiet. He leaned in. If, and this is a big, if that thing performs, I'll leave the arena for the day, but if I win, he paused for drama. His audience, the lounge, the whisperers, the armchair, aristocracy leaned forward. You walk, no questions, no apologies, just gone. Delaney looked at the red dot on the target 50 meters out, dime-sized, unflinching. She didn't agree out loud, didn't sign anything. She just reached for her rifle, and everything else fell away. The moment she raised the rifle, the room shifted. Not physically, not immediately, but like how a forest hushes before thunder or a courtroom stills. When the verdict is one breath away, the air around Lane 9 became heavy with something unspoken. Delaney Knox didn't perform. She didn't check her stance in the polished reflections or scan for cameras. She simply exhaled, the kind of exhale that didn't ask for permission. 50 meters away, the target lit up, red center 10 ring, glowing faintly beneath the digital sensors. A dime-sized truth waiting to be revealed. From the observation deck, Coach Miles Rourke lowered his reading glasses. Something felt off, not wrong, just unfamiliar. Like watching an old hymn played in a key no one remembered. Delaney's fingers curled against the stock, left hand steadying right hand, cradling the trigger. Her boots didn't shift, her shoulders didn't tense. She wasn't aiming. She was remembering. The first shot didn't sound like much. Just a clean break of silence, a crack that didn't shout so much as state something absolute. The scoreboard flickered. Daniel. At first the crowd didn't react. They were still clinging to the wrong expectations. She must have gotten lucky. She must have practiced this lane. She must have... Crack! Tumnwada. Now they were listening. Bianca Merritt's manicure hovered midair above her phone, recording from the lounge. Her brows furrowed. Theo Langston, currently third on the leaderboard, leaned forward. The top brass didn't usually attend open range sessions, but this wasn't routine. Crack, tates. Now it wasn't funny. Now it wasn't luck. Now it was math and muscle memory. And something else. Something that didn't come from titanium sights or 3D printed stabilizers. It came from dirt ranges in cold air, from the echo of boots behind her, as a voice called, wind adjustments by, feel not censor, from a rifle passed down, not purchased, from her father. Crack 10-0 fourth shot. Phones came up, but not for mockery. The arena's live app usually buzzing with leaderboards. Advertisements for new gear and smug video loops began to spike hundreds of views, then thousands. Hashtags appeared tentatively at first. Whoop the girl in lane 9. Or you dead center. Or Knox rifle. Liam Caro was no longer smiling. He adjusted his stance, checked the chamber. His rifle, glossy and precise, suddenly felt like too much. He fired. 9 bolt. Muted applause, pity applause. He looked back across the range, lips tight. Delaney didn't glance at him. Crack. Tesno. Fifth. The breath she took before each shot was identical. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just deliberate. Inhale, hold. Feel the wind across the skin. Count the beat of your own pulse against the trigger's curve. Exhale. Fire. Who trained her? Someone whispered. Coach Rourke already knew the answer. He didn't need to ask. That kind of stillness couldn't be taught in institutions. It was forged somewhere far away from biometric ID scanners and glass corridors. Sixth shot, 10-0. The sound of disbelief was no longer hidden. It was vocal, palpable. A latte dropped near the lounge. Soy milk and shock splashed across the polished marble. Bianca slowly lowered her designer earmuffs onto the table. Her eyes tracked the digital scoreboard like it was mocking her. Theo Langston whispered, "She's doing it." Someone behind him murmured, "That's not a fluke, that's a system." No one laughed anymore. Crack 10 was row 7th. Above her, the lights over lane 9 shimmered strangely, not flickering but focusing. It was like the building itself had stopped breathing, waiting to see something sacred completed. And Delaney, she didn't blink. Behind the glass, General Elliot Crane had arrived. He stood at the back of the upper gallery, arms folded behind his back, watching, not intervening, not reacting, just witnessing. By the 8th shot, the live stream surged into the tens of thousands. Veteran forums started embedding the feed. Precision shooting communities pinged each other. Turn it on, lane 9, no name, just results. Shot 8. Tianura. Rourke whispered to himself, "That's not just talent, that's inheritance." Someone near the lounge corrected him softly. "No, that's legacy." Crack. Daitsu. 9th. The room wasn't breathing anymore. Every phone was recording. Even Liam, no longer pretending to compete, stood slack with his rifle held awkwardly against his vest. He had trained with Olympians. But this was different. She wasn't fighting for the scoreboard. She was remembering someone. She adjusted her grip. Final shot. The 10th. General Crane leaned forward ever so slightly. His breath caught, not out of nervousness, but reverence. Delaney took one long inhale. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a gravel wind brushed across the Wyoming prairie. A hand on her shoulder once said, "If you're still steady when you miss, you haven't missed the point." She exhaled. Crack! Isira. Total 100-0. New arena record. The screen blinked, then glowed. Knox 100-0 record confirmed. The silence that followed was seismic, not absence, reverence. Then a single clap from the back, then another, then a wave. And suddenly the room that had whispered, mocked, and sneered stood. Applause bloomed like a wildfire through cold halls. Not for a champion, not for a name, but for a reminder. Delaney lowered her rifle. Her expression didn't change. She didn't bow. She didn't smirk. She simply turned and faced them all as if waiting for the world to finally look with clarity. Bianca Merritt stared mascara, untouched. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged. Theo Langston looked like he'd seen the future, and it had no use for his title. Liam Caro stepped forward, stunned. She looked at him. He froze. Delaney's voice broke through the echoes, calm and quiet. "My name is Delaney Knox." A hush fell again. "My father was Sergeant Major Henry Knox. He taught me to shoot before I could spell my name." Gasps audible and swallowed alike rippled through the arena. She lifted the rifle slightly. "He gave me this when he came back from his last deployment." Her voice cracked not in weakness, but in weight. "It's scratched, it's chipped, it's not perfect." She looked around the arena. "Kinda like me." No one laughed now. Not even Grayson Doyle, who had slowly retreated to the edge of the room, his smile now replaced by something he didn't recognize: respect. From the back, a silver-haired figure stepped forward. General Elliot Crane. His voice carried without effort. "Let the logbooks show. Delaney Knox is the top shooter at Archbridge Precision Arena." The room exploded again, but the sound felt earned. The applause wasn't for spectacle. It was for truth. In the instructor's booth, Rourke sat down hard, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "That's the cleanest round I've seen in my life," he muttered. She didn't shoot to prove anything. He looked at the scoreboard. She shot to remember something. Outside the lounge, the digital app refreshed. Captions changed. "Just Knox 100 at 10 shots. 10 lessons." She didn't miss anything. One post already viral read, "She didn't say a word, but she said everything." The glow of the scoreboard hadn't faded. It hummed quietly in the high vault of the arena, casting a halo of digits onto the marble floor. Knock, it's 100-0, record holder. And beneath it, Delaney stood not in triumph, not in defiance, but with the stillness of someone whose purpose had been met. Not finished, just met. The air around her was no longer stiff with judgment. It was thick with something else. Recognition. The kind that doesn't come with certificates or medals. The kind that settles into the marrow of witnesses and stays there like frost that never fully melts. But every spotlight has its shadow. And Delaney, even as the applause roared and her name was whispered like scripture, knew something else was coming. It always did. She moved quietly down the corridor toward the locker wing, her boots muffled on polished granite. She passed plaques of past champions, faces frozen in time, posed, gilded. None of them looked like her. Not in clothing, not in age, and certainly not in silence. At the end of the hallway, she found the empty bench beneath a row of unused lockers. She sat slowly, laying the rifle across her lap. Her fingers traced the initials in the stock again. HK. The weight of those letters was heavier than the wood. She remembered being 9, crying after missing her first long shot. Her father knelt beside her, voice a rasp of gravel and calm. Winning means little if your breath's not steady. Control that, and everything else follows. That was the first lesson. She never forgot it. Elsewhere in the facility, General Elliot Crane convened a quiet meeting. The top instructors, a few senior board members, Rourke Langston, Merritt Caro. They sat in a crescent around the long, polished table in the administrative wing. The windows looked out over the city, but no one was admiring the skyline. Not today. Crane stood with his hands clasped behind his back, gaze level. This isn't about a score, he said. This is about identity. He turned slightly, making eye contact with each face. She didn't just hit 10 perfect shots. She hit something we've been afraid to name. No one responded. So he went on. Every banner we fly here claims to value precision, discipline, legacy. She embodied all three and didn't ask for a thing. Bianca Merritt shifted in her seat, her arms crossed. She embarrassed the range, she said, voice tight. No, Crane replied sharper now. She revealed it. He gestured to Coach Rourke. What's your assessment? Rourke didn't hesitate. Best control I've seen in decades, not just skill. Mental stillness, muscle memory, drilled through repetition. Not comfort. And the rifle. Pre-Gulf War. Rourke said, mechanically sound, but ancient by our standards. And yet, she outshot us all. Crane turned back toward the window. I want her on staff. Gasps audible. Even Rourke raised his eyebrows. Bianca stood up halfway. You'd hire her based on one round. No, Crane said, based on everything before the first shot. Connor Stratton, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. That's why it worked, he said quietly. She didn't come here looking for a title. She just showed up. Back in lane 9, Delaney retrieved her things. She didn't rush. She moved like someone unhooking herself from the moment, gently, deliberately. A few onlookers still lingered at a distance. No photos now, no mocking captions, just watching like they didn't want her to vanish. Liam Caro approached slower this time. No swagger, just uncertainty. You okay? He asked. Delaney turned slightly, her braid swaying behind her shoulder, still absorbing. He offered a faint, almost shy smile. You shattered everything, and somehow left it standing taller. She studied him. That wasn't my goal. Maybe not, he said, but you did it anyway. A long pause followed. Then quietly, would you come back, train here with us? She tilted her head. Who's us? He chuckled softly, the ones who finally started listening. Beyond the walls of Archbridge, the world was already shifting. Livestream replays topped the trend charts. News outlets reached out for interviews. Delaney ignored them. But others spoke. Veterans reposted her perfect round with captions like, "One for the ghosts." Young shooters called her the breath between the noise. And quietly, without any press release, the arena made a change. A plaque was mounted just outside the newly designated training wing. The Knox Range, honoring discipline, legacy, precision. Delaney found it the next day. She stood there for a long moment, her shadow falling across the engraved letters. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, he'd have liked that. But the applause couldn't protect her. Not for long. The first backlash arrived without words, as most exclusion does. One morning, she arrived to find her locker reassigned, her belongings stuffed into a cardboard box labeled unclaimed. Another day, a note was taped above the coffee machine in the instructor's lounge, reserved for certified staff only. She didn't react. She just picked up her box and moved to the benches near the range entrance. Liam was there, jaw clenched. They're rattled, he muttered. They're calculating, she corrected. He looked at her. What are you going to do? She closed the box, let them. Bianca Merritt didn't come at Delaney directly. She didn't need to. She moved through board members, donors, old family allies, quiet strategy, targeted whispers, rumors of unverified credentials, and disruption of tradition. Then came the audit. The board launched a standards review of all guest instructors. Delaney's morning sessions were suspended. Her name was flagged for member conduct reassessment. The announcement came via email. Subject temporary access suspension. Knox Delaney. It didn't explain much. It didn't need to. Delaney read it, closed her screen, and stared at the hills beyond the glass wall of the range. She sat quietly, Not for herself, but for everything her father had taught her and everything they were trying to erase. But what the board forgot was this. The live stream had already changed the world. Tens of thousands had seen the 10 shots. Millions had read her name. When the suspension went public, the wave came fast. Jetzt Justice for Knox. Leather Shoot, Archbridge Reckoning. Veterans posted support videos. Former trainees filmed tributes. A letter circulated signed by 3 Olympic gold medalists. Her form was flawless. Her presence is transformative. Archbridge would be foolish to silence her. Inside the boardroom, panic brewed. Bianca slammed her tablet down. This is spiraling out of control. Crane didn't flinch. He watched the sunrise flicker on the glass. No, he said, this is control returning to the people who earned it. Delaney didn't storm the gates. She didn't hold a press conference. She just showed up. On the first Sunday after her access was revoked, a quiet ripple moved across the base of the Archbridge Hill. Hundreds arrived, not protesters, participants. Veteran students, disillusioned shooters, kids with paper targets, old men with folded lawn chairs. They gathered at the fence just outside arena jurisdiction. They brought thermoses, signs, and silence. And then Delaney, she walked up carrying the same rifle, the same braid, the same breath, no podium, just a wooden crate, a gravel lot, and 50 meters of wind. Liam set up the targets. Rourke stood to the side, watching over everything with eyes that now held something closer to pride than protocol. Delaney stepped to the line. She didn't speak. She just breathed. Crack! The first target split. Crack! The second tore open. By the 10th, the silence was sacred. Then she raised her rifle toward a special target, a single word painted in red. Legacy. She exhaled. Crack. The bullet split the L in half. Inside Archbridge's boardroom, General Crane turned the live stream monitor to face the others. Bianca didn't speak. Connor Stratton rubbed his forehead. Crane's voice was steel. She never needed our lanes, he said. Rourke, watching the feed behind him, added, she made her own. That afternoon, another email went out. Subject, full reinstatement, Knox Delaney. Effective. Immediately, all privileges restored. Instructor contract. Pending. Liam found her outside her car, hair windblown, gear packed. They reinstated you. He grinned. Sayed they recognized your leadership. She raised an eyebrow. Took them long enough. They're asking if you'll return as an official trainer. She looked out at the range. A line of young shooters had already begun to form. One girl held a hand-drawn target with Delaney's initials scribbled in pencil. Delaney smiled. Tell them I already started. Dawn was different now. Not quieter, not louder, just more aware. As the sun peeled itself over the Archbridge ridgelines, it bathed the newly named Knox Range in amber, and gold light no longer reflected off polished marble, but absorbed by the raw presence of people who didn't used to belong. Delaney stood alone at the firing line again. Same denim jacket, same boots, same rifle worn by years, not polish. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows. Her breath was visible in the morning chill. Her stance hadn't changed. But something else had. This time she wasn't alone. They arrived in 2s and 3s. First came Liam, bleary-eyed but steady. A thermos in one hand, his rifle slung with less bravado now, and more humility. Ellen Theo Langston. He didn't announce himself. He didn't demand a lane. He just nodded, rifle in hand, and took his place on the gravel beside the others. By the 6th morning, they were no longer outliers. They were a rhythm. Younger members joined not just the scholarship shooters, but the ones who used to walk with chin-high arrogance and scoreboards memorized. Now they stood quiet, now they listened. Coach Rourke watched from the bench by the bleachers, arms crossed, coffee cooling by his knee. Delaney didn't give speeches. She didn't hand out syllabi. She taught like her father did, by doing and by not flinching when they failed. The first lesson was always breath. Find it, she said on the second day. Not control, not aim, breath. They fumbled with it. At first they tried to mimic her posture. They followed her timing, but they missed the point. She watched the way their shoulders tensed, how their thumbs gripped too tight, how they stole glances at their phones between rounds. She didn't yell. She just moved beside one of the shooters, a girl with shaking fingers and a heart beating too fast, and whispered, "You're trying to win. Try remembering instead." The girl blinked, then nodded, and fired. Center. Word spread not through announcements, but results. Those who trained with Delaney weren't just scoring better. They were shooting differently. Cleaner, calmer. And the board noticed, not with praise, with discomfort. The pushback came subtly. An email from a senior member questioning her lack of formal credentials. A newsletter hinting at the need to uphold prestige. A donation was delayed, a gallery scheduled. And then a column, syndicated nationally, subtle in tone but surgical in implication. The marksman mirage is Delaney Knox. Just a viral fluke. It referenced anonymous instructors who expressed concern over her methodology. It called her a folk hero, not a formalist. It used words like sentimental, impressionistic, undisciplined. Coach Rourke read it with a mouthful of fury, and a pencil snapped clean in half. Liam threw his copy in the trash. Delaney, she didn't react. She was cleaning her rifle. You should respond. Liam said, I know a few editors. We can publish a rebuttal. She looked at him, calm, undisturbed. They're not scared of me, she said softly. They're scared of the silence I bring. Liam furrowed his brow. What does that mean? It means I don't need their language to speak for me. The board called a closed session. Inside the top-floor conference room, all glass gold trim and shadows the old names gathered. Crane stood at the head. Behind him, a live feed from the Knox range still flickered on a screen. Delaney walking the line with a 12-year-old student gently adjusting her elbow, whispering something no microphone caught. Bianca Merritt was back. She didn't sit. She leaned against the corner window, arms crossed. She's drawing too much attention, she said. And not the right kind. Connor Stratton was seated beside Crane. He no longer wore his Stratton Industries cufflinks. She's drawing results, he said flatly. She's dividing the membership, Bianca countered. Crane turned. She's dividing illusion from substance, he said. That's what revolutions do. A board member down the line cleared his throat. We should at least consider returning to pre-viral standards. Quietly. It's what the donors expect. Crane stepped forward. No, he said, then pointed toward the feed, the young girl now hitting her target. Delaney quietly nodding behind her. She's not a disruption. Crane said she's the future. Outside, Delaney's group grew. Not in numbers. In depth. Each morning, the line of shooters became more than a class. It became a covenant. Not everyone could keep up. Some dropped out. Others stayed not for points or medals, but because something about training with her made them feel possible. They stopped checking leaderboards. They stopped filming their own shots. They stopped pretending. And they started remembering. One afternoon, Delaney returned to the locker hallway. Her nameplate was gone. Again. In its place, a polished brass tag marked reserved. Inside, the locker was empty. Her gear sat in a plain cardboard box on the bench again. No note this time. Liam arrived just as she picked it up. They're playing the long game, he said, trying to erase you one inconvenience at a time. Delaney didn't respond. She picked up the box, balanced it under her arm, and said, let them, but it wasn't erasure they triggered. It was ignition, because the world had changed, and the world was watching. The erosion didn't begin with thunder. It began with whispers. At Archbridge, there were no declarations, no dramatic dismissals, no doors slammed open with shouted orders. Instead, Delaney Knox was slowly removed, the way stone is worn down by wind grain, by grain layer by layer. No one banned her, but her name disappeared from internal memos. Invitations stopped arriving. The board meetings no longer included her program data. The instructors' group photo was reshot this time without her. Coach Rourke saw it. He felt the shift before the press ever did. It's coordinated, he muttered to Liam one morning, curated silence. That's how places like this fight change with absence, not bullets. Liam clenched his jaw, his knuckles white around his thermos. They're scared. They should be. Delaney knew, of course. She saw the signs, the empty chair where her name used to be, the new training schedules that conveniently overlapped hers, the cameras that turned away when she entered. But she said nothing. She just kept showing up at dawn. The Knox range still open to her steps. The students still arrived, sometimes late, sometimes hesitant, always willing. And that was enough until it wasn't. The final blow didn't come from a boardroom. It came from an inbox. An official memo, unsigned, sent to her personal email at 9:14 p.m. Subject guest access. Suspension. Effective immediately, guest credentials for Miss Delaney Knox have been suspended, pending full board review. The Archbridge Precision Arena. Administrative Committee. There was no reason cited, no appeal listed, just a void. Delaney read it in silence. She didn't throw the laptop. She didn't call anyone. She simply leaned back in her chair. Eyes unfocused, breath slow. The city lights blinked beyond her window like a distant constellation, unreachable. Her rifle leaned in the corner. Its shadow stretched long across the wall, still and unshaken. Liam found her the next morning, sitting on the tailgate of her car, parked at the base of Archbridge Hill. She wasn't dressed to train, just jeans, hoodie rifle case resting beside her, like a memory too sacred to open. "They locked you out," he said quietly. She nodded once. "Want to fight it?" He frowned. "How?" "By not disappearing." He didn't argue. He simply sat beside her, the early morning wind pulling at their sleeves. "They're scared of you," he said after a while. She looked ahead, eyes on the arena's silhouette against the sky. "They're scared of what I represent." "What's that?" Delaney's voice was even. "Proof." What the board didn't account for, what they never could have prepared for, was that the public had already decided what she meant. They had watched the shots. They had memorized the name. When news of the suspension hit the forums, the reaction wasn't fury. It was mobilization. Hashtags lit up like brush fires. Then, now będzie lather shoot, Starring's Knox record, Darren's Archbridge reckoning. Veterans posted testimonials. "She shoots like we used to fight breath, not bravado." Mothers of young girls shared clips of Delaney teaching. "I told my daughter she didn't have to be loud to be strong. Now she believes me." And quietly but forcefully came the letter. Signed by former Olympic medalists, military snipers, and sports journalists. Her technique is irrefutable. Her presence is historic. If Archbridge silences her, they silence the very principles they claim to uphold. The board called an emergency session. Bianca Merritt was already waiting when General Crane arrived. "This is spiraling," she said. "Pacing, sponsors are nervous. The donors are threatening to pull. She's making us look obsolete." Crane didn't flinch. "She didn't make you look that way. You were already there." Bianca turned sharply. "We need to regain control." Crane looked toward the live stream playing in the corner, a shaky handheld feed from just outside the arena gate. The camera showed folding chairs, makeshift targets, veterans adjusting scopes with wrinkled hands, kids balancing borrowed rifles, and Delaney, in front, still focused, leading without asking. That morning, hundreds stood on the gravel lot beneath Archbridge Hill. They came from different cities, backgrounds, belief systems. They carried lawn chairs and thermoses, targets, and stories. They didn't come to shout. They came to shoot. Delaney stood at the edge of the makeshift line. No podium, no speeches, just gravel and distance, just memory and breath. Coach Rourke waited beside her, folding his arms across his chest. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded always. He turned to the crowd. "We don't need a scoreboard today." They all watched as she stepped forward, loading the rifle with the same reverence as always. The wind moved across the range like it was holding its breath. Wand Laney raised the M70 Breathe in Stillness legacy. Crack! The target split in half. Gasps, cheers phones. Recording. But it didn't feel like performance. It felt like proof. The 10th shot came as the light turned gold over the arena's glass facade. Delaney raised her rifle toward a special target. One word handwritten in red. Legacy. She exhaled. Crack! The bullet tore the center apart. Inside the boardroom, Crane turned the monitor toward the others. "She never needed us," he said. "We needed her." Rourke added quietly. "She didn't ask for a platform. She became one." One of the senior members sighed. "If we don't reinstate her now, we become the footnote." Bianca said nothing, but her silence wasn't strength anymore. It was resignation. That afternoon, the email went out. Subject reinstatement approved, Delaney Knox. All privileges restored, instructor contract to follow. Liam found her standing beneath the hill hands in her pockets. They folded, he grinned. She tilted her head. "No." They opened. "They want you back, officially." She turned slowly, eyes on the range. Beyond it, a group of teens were setting up targets with hand-drawn dots in the center. One of them wore boots too big. Another carried a paper with her initials on it. Delaney smiled. "Tell them I already started." They didn't expect the leak, not from inside their circle. Not from someone with the clearance to forward internal communications, minutes from board meetings, strategy memos stamped confidential, or when debatten it sky stars. But the truth has a strange way of escaping, especially when it's been locked behind glass for too long. 3 days after Delaney's reinstatement, the internet exploded. An anonymous source uploaded over 60 internal emails and memos from Archbridge Precision Arena's leadership spanning the past 18 months. The documents were detailed, labeled time-stamped. They showed everything: deliberate manipulation of leaderboards to favor preferred members, suppression of veteran-led training programs to maintain elite optics, direct orders to relocate Delaney's locker, a private message from Bianca Merritt to a donor: "She'll fade out soon. She's not one of us, just a rural storm with no staying power." And beneath it all, an unbroken thread of classism, politics, and image control. They called it tradition. The world called it what it was: sabotage. The hashtag #DarnArchbridgeExposed trended globally for 72 hours. Donors withdrew. Sponsorship deals collapsed. The foundation supporting Bianca's family legacy issued a formal statement of distance. Connor Stratton's son, of one of Archbridge's wealthiest backers, posted a handwritten apology. It read, "I knew I stayed silent, I benefited, but silence is complicity. And Delaney Knox showed me what integrity looks like." Bianca Merritt's locker was emptied the next morning. No announcement, just gone. Her social profiles turned private. Her name trailed away from the leadership page. She didn't return to the range. No one asked where she went. Because in places like Archbridge, vanishing is louder than any resignation letter. Delaney said nothing publicly. She didn't comment, didn't retweet, didn't gloat. She showed up at dawn, like always, same rifle, same braid, same breath. And the line was longer now. Not crowded, curated. Veterans stood beside high schoolers. Former Olympians next to weekend hobbyists. They didn't come for trophies. They came for the fire she lit inside them, quiet and steady. Coach Rourke stood at the center of it all, clipboard forgotten under his arm, watching as the range transformed. He turned to Liam. "We built this place on steel and glass." Liam nodded. "She reminded us steel isn't what holds it together." Rourke pointed to the plaque, the one above the training wing. "The Knox Range Discipline Legacy Precision. This stays," he said, "forever." The board met again, stripped of half its members. Crane presided no longer from behind a podium, but among them, seated at the long oak table. "We've been embarrassed," someone muttered. "No," Crane replied. "We've been corrected." There was a silence. He continued. "We have a chance to rebuild something that will last longer than any sponsorship contract. Something earned." Another pause. Then someone asked, "Where do we begin?" Crane looked at the empty chair once reserved for honorary guests, then at the freshly printed Knox Fellowship folders on the desk. By remembering who this was meant for, within the month Archbridge announced sweeping changes. A new mentorship program, the Knox Fellowship. Its goal to support rural, underserved, and veteran marksmen, those long kept at the fringes. Applications flooded in, and in every welcome kit sent to the new cohort, one name was etched on the envelope. Delaney Knox, mentor. She didn't attend the orientation gala. Instead, she waited outside the practice field with a clipboard in one hand and her father's rifle in the other. One by one, her trainees arrived. They didn't call her coach. They just called her present, and she liked it that way. That morning, a familiar face appeared at the gate. Bianca Merritt. Gone were the tailored jackets and curated entourage. She wore plain clothes, no rifle in sight, just a folded target in her hand. Delaney met her eyes, said nothing. Bianca stepped forward. "I watched the outdoor shoot," she said. Her voice was small. "Honest, you hit the word legacy dead center." Delaney gave a nod. Bianca looked down. "I want to start over." She held up the target, a red dot, hand-drawn in the center pencil, marks scuffed from too much erasing. No titles, no board seats, no favors. Delaney studied her, then handed her a clipboard. "The line starts at sunrise." Bianca joined the line. No one laughed. No one whispered. Because out there under the morning wind, reputation didn't matter. Only breath. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. The noise faded, not into silence, but into stillness. No one bragged anymore. They focused. People didn't post scores. They posted reflections. They didn't flaunt stats. They shared lessons. And every morning before the sun crowned the ridgeline, Delaney stood at the edge of the gravel, watching, waiting. She didn't need to speak. She already had, with 10 shots, with one name, with breath that never wavered. The arena had changed, but not in the way outsiders expected. It didn't become louder. It didn't become flashier. It didn't rebrand with slogans or ad campaigns. It became quieter, and in that quiet it became stronger. Where once there had been posturing and whispers about bloodlines and family names, now there was something else, the sound of breath before the shot. the silence after, the discipline in between. Delaney never asked to lead that change, but every morning she embodied it. Coach Rourke often sat on the far bench with a notebook open half full of scribbled observations. The other half, just blank space he left on purpose. You don't teach precision with noise, he once told Theo Langston, who had returned to train under Delaney after vanishing during the scandal. You leave space for them to step into their own focus. Theo had changed. He still carried the gleaming black rifle his family had custom built for him, but now he carried it without performance. He no longer checked his name on the digital leaderboard. He checked his breath. Bianca was there too every morning, never early, never late. She didn't try to reclaim status. She asked questions. She took notes. She stayed after sessions to reset the targets. Sometimes she didn't fire a single round. The others noticed. No one praised her. No one mocked her. They simply accepted her presence. Because the range wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about resilience. One morning, as the sky lit soft above the Knox range, Delaney gathered a small group near the outer field, the one reserved for long-distance drills, where targets looked more like suggestions than circles. She stood at the edge of the brush wind curling around her braid. "We're moving outside today," she said. "No digital sensors, no electronic feedback, just gravel wind and you." Liam raised a brow. "Going analog," she smirked. "Going honest." The group followed her into the open terrain, a shallow quarry once used for special training, the kind her father favored. The session was brutal. Wind cut crossways. The terrain was uneven. Shots missed a lot. Delaney didn't correct them with critique. She corrected them with presence, standing beside them, shoulder to shoulder, adjusting a grip with 2 fingers, tilting a chin gently, saying nothing for long stretches, letting them confront their own patterns. And when someone finally hit center, she didn't clap, she just nodded. "Now again, this time, tell me why." That question lingered. Why? Not how fast, not how far. Why? It echoed through the range long after the session ended. It changed how they loaded their rifles, how they walked, how they showed up. Later that evening, Delaney sat beside the fire pit near the edge of the facility, a wool blanket around her shoulders, fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee. Liam joined her. He didn't speak at first, just watched the flames breathe. "You okay?" he finally asked. She nodded, just remembering. "Your dad." She looked at the sky, always. He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "He'd be proud." She gave a soft smile. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this for him or for me. Does it matter?" Her gaze fell back to the fire. Maybe not. He reached out, took her free hand. She didn't pull away. Bianca stayed late the next morning. Delaney found her alone, still resetting targets. Her hands were blistered from gripping too tightly. "You're improving," Delaney said. Bianca didn't meet her eyes. "I don't deserve this." Delaney's voice was calm but firm. "You didn't earn the past, but you can earn tomorrow." Bianca nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me stay." Delaney paused. "You stayed on your own." By the end of that month, Archbridge felt like a place reborn. The glass still shone, the marble still gleamed, but it no longer spoke of power. It reflected something else. Discipline, dedication. A kind of quiet that could only come from humility earned the hard way. Every shot fired on that range now had weight not just in trajectory, but in memory. People stopped aiming to win. They started aiming to mean something. The morning of the Archbridge Annual Invitational arrived with little fanfare. No red carpets, no celebrity guests, no champagne brunches like the years before. Just sunlight clean and gold pouring across the northern ridge. The arena was silent, sacred. Every lane had been chalked fresh, every monitor synced and calibrated, but the air didn't hum with vanity or nerves. It pulsed with expectation. Because this year, the Invitational wasn't about dominance. It was about witnessing, and at the center of it all stood Delaney Knox. She didn't enter from the front. She didn't arrive in an SUV or stride in with a sponsor's patch on her shoulder. She came through the side gate rifle case in hand, wearing her father's jacket worn at the elbows, faded at the seams. Not as a statement, as presence. The other competitors, 10 of them, the best in the country, stood in loose formation behind their assigned lanes. Some glanced her way. Some nodded. Some didn't look at all, afraid of what it might mean to acknowledge her. But she felt none of that. Because Delaney didn't carry rivalry. She carried remembrance. From the bleachers, Liam watched in silence. Coach Rourke sat near the back, his hat over his chest. General Crane stood just behind the judge's booth, arms folded. When Delaney's name was announced, no one cheered. No one needed to. They stood out of respect, not for what she might do, but for what she already was. Delaney approached lane 7. She ran her hand across the wood of her rifle one more time, felt the initials carved into the stock.
Tachka.
Then she closed her eyes and breathed. 10 rounds, 1 chance. No spectacle. Just truth. Shot 1, 10. Iroa. Breathe for the child inside you who thought the world would never listen. Shot 2, 10-0. Steady. For the soldier who carried you on his shoulders and called you his legacy. Shot 3, 10-0. Sight for every girl told her worth was skin, not skill. Shot 4, 10-0. Silence for the apology never given and never needed. Shot 5, 10-0. Resolve. For the teachers who said, maybe next time. Shot 6, 10-0. Memory for the mothers who packed rifles instead of roses. Shot 7, 10-0. Truth for the ones who left too soon. Shot 8, 10-0. Wait. For the letters unread. For the goodbyes unspoken. Shot 9, 10-0. Hope for every student watching breath held. Shot 10, 10-0 legacy. Dead center. The scoreboard blinked. Then it pulsed. Knox 100-0. Invitational record. She didn't bow. She didn't raise her arms. She turned, and the arena rose, not out of surprise, out of reverence. Liam reached her first. That wasn't for the leaderboard, was it? Delaney shook her head, eyes soft. No, she whispered. That was goodbye. 2 months later, the mentorship program at Archbridge was officially renamed. The Knox Fellowship, its mission to provide training resources and community support for overlooked marksmen, rural kids, veterans, first-generation athletes. Applications came in from all over the world. In every welcome kit, a letter signed with Delaney's name and the phrase, "Breathe, aim, remember." Delaney moved to the hills just beyond the city. She bought a modest property with open land, enough space for an outdoor range, and a fire pit. Liam moved with her. They never made a big announcement. They didn't need to. He wore her initials on a leather cord around his neck. And when she smiled at him, it was the only clarity he'd ever needed. She trained quietly, taught sparingly, and always kept the old M70 polished not for shine, but for memory. When asked about her legacy, she only said, "I didn't come to change their minds. I came to change their aim." The first time a kid showed up barefoot, it reminded Delaney of Wyoming, of Pebbles dirt, roads wind-whipped braids, and targets painted on fence posts. She didn't send the boy home. She gave him an old pair of boots she kept in a box by the barn. They were 2 sizes too big. He stuffed the toes with newspaper. The next morning, he hit a soda can at 30 meters. Delaney didn't smile. She nodded. Again, she said, and this time, tell me why. They came quietly now. Not from the cities, not for press. They came from places no one cared to pronounce. Counties where training meant BB guns and backyard silence. Reservists, high school dropouts, military wives, discharged snipers with no pensions. They didn't come to win anything. They came to remember something they'd forgotten about themselves. Delaney taught them, not with curriculum, with rhythm. The rules were simple. Show up before sunrise. Bring what you have. Leave ego in the truck. When someone missed, she didn't correct with volume. She stepped beside them, knelt into the gravel, and whispered, "Again." And that whisper spread. Liam built the benches himself. He repainted the target stands, set up tin kettles for coffee, rewired the old outdoor lights. But it was never a school. Not in the official sense. It was a threshold. People crossed it one way, anxious, uncertain, and left steadier, quieter. Coach Rourke visited once a week. He watched and never interfered. She doesn't create shooters, he told Crane over the phone one night. She creates memory keepers. Every shot had a story now. One girl aimed for the center with a patch sewn on her sleeve. Her brother's unit, KIA Fallujah. A young man hit 4 consecutive 10s, then collapsed in the dirt, sobbing. Later he confessed he hadn't held a rifle since the suicide of his mentor. Delaney didn't offer therapy. She offered presence. Shoot to remember, she said, not to escape. Sometimes they stayed after sunset. They sat by the fire pit, no phones, no streaming. They passed around mugs of strong black coffee. Sometimes someone would ask about the 10 shots. Delaney never told the same version twice, but she always ended the same way. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you aim toward every time you breathe. One morning, Bianca arrived early. She had cleaned all the targets before anyone else arrived. Delaney found her kneeling by the lane markers, scrubbing off mud and initials from yesterday's rain. "You don't need to do that," Delaney said. Bianca didn't look up. "I do." Delaney tilted her head. "You're staying." "I think I finally started arriving." Delaney walked away with a quiet nod. That was all Bianca ever wanted. Back at Archbridge, the annual reports were different now. The Knox Fellowship had grown. Sponsorships returned not for names, but for outcomes. The board no longer held court in suits and glass-walled rooms. Now they met on the range. Sometimes barefoot kids joined those meetings, and no one questioned it. Because now everyone knew real leaders don't ask to be seen. They teach others how to see themselves. The hills were still that morning. No wind, no birdsong, no whisper of clouds. Just breath. The kind of breath that comes before a storm or a revelation or both. Delaney stood at the edge of the range. Her braid was tied high, her rifle polished familiar, scarred hung across her shoulder like a memory she carried forward. But this morning wasn't training. It was testimony. She had gathered them all without an invitation, without a speech. Just a quiet message passed from student to student, from veteran to child, from someone who had learned how to breathe again to someone who had forgotten they were allowed to. "She's shooting today." That was all it took. By sunrise, the line curved along the gravel edge and into the tall grass. They didn't ask what it was for. They just knew. This was not a performance. This was a page-turning. Liam stood beside her, not holding a clipboard, not offering guidance, just present. He'd seen every phase of this woman, the outsider, the record breaker, the mentor, the quiet storm that rewrote a range's bloodline without ever shouting. "You ready?" he asked. Delaney looked toward the horizon. "I've been ready my whole life." There was no official name for this event. No medals, no scoreboard, only a row of hand-built targets spaced 50 meters apart. Each one carried a word, painted in red. Simple block letters, not for competition, for closure. Delaney stepped to the line. The first target read, "Fear." She lowered into position, breath calm, body steady. Crack dead center. The second noise, crack clean, third doubt. Crack! Fourth hollow praise. Crack. Fifth judgment. Crack. She moved like wind through trees, quiet, purposeful, unrelenting. Every shot wasn't a rejection of her past, but an honoring of what she had walked through to get here. The sixth target read, "Inheritance." Crack. The seventh silence. Crack. Not the kind she loved, but the kind that once tried to erase her. She turned it into her strength. By the eighth shot, the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't even whisper. They simply watched, because they weren't witnessing skill anymore. They were witnessing release. The ninth target stood taller. It read, "Forgiveness." Delaney inhaled slower than before. Her finger hovered over the trigger for half a second longer. Then crack. It tore through the center of the word. A message spoken without breath. Forgiveness begins within. The final target was the largest. One word, painted by hand that morning by one of her youngest students. "You." Delaney didn't kneel. She stood, and she didn't raise the rifle immediately. She looked behind her, at Liam, at Bianca, at the kid in the two big boots who now shot better than any coach, at Theo Langston who had stayed after every session for a year, resetting targets for new kids without ever asking for credit, at Coach Rourke, at the veterans with folded arms and open eyes, at the girl in the third row who held a notepad titled, "My breath belongs to me," and she smiled. Then she raised the rifle. Crack. The bullet hit the O in perfect center, and the crowd exhaled. As one, Delaney lowered the rifle. She didn't bow, she didn't speak. She turned, her braid swayed like punctuation, and she walked, not away, but forward. Later that week, she packed the M70 into its case for the last time. Not because she was finished, but because she was beginning something else. She mailed the case to a small-town range in Montana with a note inside. "Teach them breath first, then stillness, then memory." She continued to train, but only those who found her. No advertisements, no website, no sign on the road. Only gravel wind and a barn that smelled like oil and rain. Years later, her name still appeared on ranges across the country, in whispers, in routines, in the way a shooter pauses before they pull the trigger. A breath A, focus a Y. Bianca became an instructor. Theo built community ranges in Appalachia. Liam stayed by her side, and Coach Rourke retired peacefully, not because he was done, but because he knew the future was already in place. There was no statue of Delaney Knox, no Hall of Fame plaque, but in a glass case at Archbridge, just beneath the mounted inscription, "Legacy is AIM," made visible, there hung a faded jacket, frayed at the cuffs, stitched at the collar, and beside it an old wooden rifle, chipped scarred, etched with 2 initials, HK. Below it a single brass plate. She didn't ask to be remembered. She just remembered who she was every time she breathed. And far beyond the city, on a hill, no map-marked Delaney Knox stood at a handmade range teaching a small group of kids how to stop shaking, how to listen, how to fire without fear, and how to make every shot count not for score but for story. One of them missed and started to apologize. Delaney smiled, shook her head. Again, she said gently, "This time, remember why you're here.